to the story of the hour, which is tomorrow's European elections. If you're listening to it, no, you won't. Well, yes, the European elections. Now, I've noticed something I've never seen in the British media before, which is an extraordinary unanimity among all the papers, left and right, and they have been for some time, united in hatred of UKIP and Nigel Farage. And you can count on the fingers of a sawmiller's hand the number of journalists who've actually failed to fall into line with this narrative. And you are one of them. You wrote a very good piece in The Spectator the other day. There's Brendan O'Neill, who wrote a great piece at Spite. But really, have you noticed this as well? It's as if the media class have allied themselves with the political class to say to the people, no, you shall not have a choice. You must go on enjoying the experience you've been having before. You must go and have either Labour or Lib Dems or the Conservatives. You cannot choose this other party because they are too weird and different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the complete ganging up of the establishment of the present political class and the media. And in particular, by the way, the weird way in which the conservative media in Britain has united against UKIP and become the amen chorus of the Conservative Party. And not just the traditional Tory press. There has been a deal done between the Conservative Party headquarters and the Guardian newspaper, the most left-wing newspaper in Britain, the most anti-Conservative Party newspaper in Britain, which have been being fed anti-UKIP stories by the Tories. And they just print them. This is research from the Conservative Party's headquarters, not from The Guardian, not from The Times, but The Times and The Guardian are running them across their front page repeatedly. It really is, whatever way you look at it, it should be a disgrace. It should be seen as a disgrace that the media should lower itself like this.
Exactly. Given that the British media has been feared and admired throughout the world for what? Well, since John Wilkes, at least.
Yes.
So that's over 200 years of the British press being fearless, which is why, of course, the American media tends to headhunt so many British journalists. Tina Brown, etc., because there is a sort of an attack, a gleeful irresponsibility about the British journalist.
Yes,
which very few Americans and American newspapers can match, and this is great. And this, of course, is why we had the Leveson inquiry, trying to muzzle our out of control media. And now here we are. We have all these journalists, these right wing journalists and right wing newspapers, behaving suddenly like poodles.
Absolutely. Let me give you one example, by the way, which I just picked up my Evening Standard today. This is Matthew D'Ancona, an absolute loyalist, conservative supporter, wrote a book, the official book on the coalition government and so on. Matthew D'Ancona, very, very smart man. This is what he says in his standard column tonight to the readers of London in order to terrify them against voting UKIP. He says, last week in an astonishing interview, Farage went even further. Quote, I was asked if a group of Romanian men moved in next door, would you be concerned? And if you lived in London, I think you would be. Quote, end of quote. Now, this is D'Ancona. If this is not racist, then nothing is racist. Well, let me correct you on that, Matt. If this is not racist, then nothing is racist. I can think of 1,000 things, real things that have happened in history that have actually been racist. You know, lynching black people, racist. Apartheid South Africa, racist. 1930s German laws against Jews, racist. Nigel Farage
Rape of Nanking, racist.
Rape of Nanking, racist. We could go on. There are real things. Racism has actually been a force in history which has done unbelievable horrors and damage. And yet here is Matthew D'Ancona saying that Nigel Farage, according to an interview, since said that he was tired and he was, being lazy. But anyhow, simply says that because of the figures around Romanians in the UK, Romanian immigrants in the UK, the figures that show their involvement in crime, which are alarming figures, he said, there's a difference between a family of Germans moving in next door and a group of Romanian men. And yet this is being presented as, if the eve of Kristallnacht, it's if vote Farage, get Hitler is the thing that the British press is trying to do. And, one of the amazing things about this, I just wanted to mention this for a second. One of the amazing things about this is the British media are absolutely intent on describing UKIP as this far-right, fascist, racist party. First of all, I mean, by the way, there was an event yesterday where black UKIP candidates were being shouted at and called racist by far left-wing agitprop groups who were pretending to be Romanians. That was, I think, among other things, exposed on your news website, Breitbart.
Yes.
So here you have this weird thing where white leftists are shouting at black UKIPers, calling them racist. So we've entered that bizarre world where words seem to mean whatever you want them to mean. But there's a serious thing behind this, which is worth mentioning. Across Europe, there is an anti-EU movement. It is from the far left, the far right, and a lot of places in between. It's not hard to be anti-EU these days, particularly if you're, say, someone in Cyprus who's seen their savings raided because of the EU's ineptness and the Euro monetary policies of recent years. So there's good reason. It's not a phobia, as it were, to go back to one of the favourite phrases of the era. But just consider for a moment what this manifestation has shown itself to have across the continent. In Greece, there's the extreme leftist party Syriza. In Greece, there's also the extreme far right-wing party Golden Dawn, which actually has, street thugs and actually, beats people up and so on, and worse. In Hungary, you've got Jobbik, an actual street thug fascist movement. Moving a bit, you've got Marine Le Pen and her Front National in France. You've got Geert Wilders and the Freedom Party in Holland. Then you have UKIP in London and the rest of the United Kingdom. UKIP, which actually is not a street thug fascist movement. It's a group of, as far as I can see, broadly libertarian people who don't like the fact that Britain doesn't seem to be in control of her own borders or able to make her own laws anymore. And here are these people, when there are actually extremist movements across a continent, describing UKIP as part of them. To do that, you have to be completely myopic. Strangely, you have to be somebody who doesn't look beyond Britain's borders. It's obscene.
Yes. What interests me about this is that it's not about the traditional divide between left and right, left-wing parties fighting right-wing parties, left-wing media arguing against right-wing media. It seems to be the whole of the media and the whole of the political class against the rest, against ordinary people.
Yes. And I mean, that's why I mean, there are all sorts of problems about voting UKIP, mainly in my view that the UKIP's retention rate for MEPs is very bad, and it's hard to know what the wrecking alliance will look like. Nobody wants to be in the same alliance. It's very hard to see how this protest vote, if it goes ahead across Europe, will actually organise to do something meaningful to change the terrible, terrible system that's currently in place. But if anyone needed a really good reminder and a demonstration, a proof that you should vote UKIP, it's come from this obscene alliance of the mainstream parties and almost all of the media. As I say, like so many other problems of our time, the attempt to effectively sort of medicalise your opponents, that you're phobes of some kinds, you're racists, you're people with some weird disorder. No, the EU has really gone tits up in the last decade. It really has taken more and more powers to itself. It really does want more and more powers. When it goes to the people of any country for a referendum on further powers, and it very rarely does that, if the people vote the wrong way, they're told, no, wrong answer, vote again. It really has created a situation where across much of southern Europe, you have more than 50% youth unemployment. Unbelievable, untold trouble for years to come as a result of that. Noticing these things and wanting to change them is not a phobia. It doesn't make you a racist. It doesn't make you a xenophobe or a bigot. It makes you a perfectly sensible person. And when the entire political class and media try to present that otherwise, I think that good people should vote and make their voice heard in another way.
Yeah, well, do you know, Douglas, I think it's about even more than Europe and the democratic deficit and about immigration and all the things that Nigel Farage has been, all the explicit political issues that Nigel Farage has been attacked on. It seems to me we look at some of the other stories that have been going on in the media in the last couple of weeks. You look at the story about the BBC, a local broadcaster who was sacked or forced out of his job for playing a 1920s or 30s version of The Sun Has Got His Hat On,
Yes.
unaware that it included the N-word. Then you've got Jeremy Clarkson being threatened with dismissal from the most popular programme on the BBC, Top Gear, because in an outtake which was never used again, he used or mumbled the N-word.
In the context, it should be said, in the context of a rhyme.
Of a rhyme,
which he was pointing
which
out
you and
can't
I
any longer say.
Exactly. I mean,
so it wasn't as if he was casually dropping the word in because he says that in his spare time.
Well, can I ask you, Douglas? You're about 10 years younger than me, or possibly even more than that. Horribly,
20, I should think.
Oh, you bastard! When you were growing up, did you still have the N-word and eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or not? Or was it tiger?
No, I think it was. I think it had stopped by the time I was young. But I mean, there are always in every generation there are weird things that change. I mean, I remember it wasn't weird to casually when I was at very young and at state primary school in Britain. It wasn't weird to refer to, for instance, people who were mean, as being Jewy or Scottish. Now, I mean, certainly the former of those would rightly be unthinkable now. But, these things change, they move. And I mean, this is what's so strange. I mean, I'm an anti-fascist. I'm anti-fascism. I don't like fascism. I don't like it if it's Nazis, and I don't like it if it's Islamists. But there is something so strange about our era, which actually seems to think that that fascism consists of catching people who have put on The Sun Has Got His Hat On in the wrong recording, or catching someone saying something which refers to a children's rhyme. I mean, it's absurd. Yes. Around the world, you have people from Russia to Saudi Arabia to Brunei, as we were discussing, actually doing and pursuing fascistic policies. And here we all are, desperately trying to find somebody who's, got a swastika tattoo or uses the wrong nursery rhyme or something. I said the other day somewhere, one of the striking things of our age in our country at any rate, and we're very lucky that this is the case, is that the demand for racists and fascists vastly outstrips the supply. There's almost none. I'm happy to say that there are almost no Nazis in modern Britain, but there is such demand for them. There are whole government sponsored bodies and organisations and trusts and think tanks and pressure groups and magazines and press and media and newspapers who live for this stuff.
There are so many pressure groups. Everyday sexism. There are these. Well, I mean, these feminists who are feminist harpies who are on the lookout for any slip of the tongue. And
yes, they can't bear not finding sexist. They can't bear it.
It's awful. The darlings must get very upset when they go home without having encountered an example of everyday sexism, which is why, of course, we had this terrible case of this PA who was working for the senior chap at the Premier League, a guy called Richard Scudamore. I mean, I imagine that, like me, you not being a football nut, you probably hadn't heard of this guy until the story broke. So he'd been exchanging emails which used a few sexist terms, as probably people in football do when they're having private exchanges. And his PA, who's obviously some kind of crusading feminist, shopped him to the Sunday Mirror, a left-wing tabloid, and there were calls for this poor chap's head. Now, that's... These things happen, but what really disturbed me about this was the development which happened, I think, yesterday, which is when David Cameron, the Prime Minister, apparently, was asked whether, had this chap been working for him, whether he would have been sacked. And Cameron suggested that yes, he would have been sacked. It subsequently emerged that Cameron had not even been familiar with the contents of the emails. He just felt that this guy should be sacked. Now, this brings us back to the point about this war between the political and media class and the rest of us. Is that Cameron is aligning himself with the political correctness which has permeated our culture, made people's lives misery. And all over the country, people in pubs are having the same conversation, and they're saying, why do we have to put up with this stuff? Why do we have to have every aspect of our lives policed by these people?
Yes.
So David Cameron is aligning himself with the very thing that UKIP voters are probably going to be voting against. And I say he deserves it.
Absolutely. If I can just add to that, I mean, there's quickly one anecdote and then a point. The anecdote is this: looking up on this business about this man who put on the wrong recording of "The Sun Has Got His Hat On." I mean, I love it. We should call it "Sun Has Got His Hat On Gate" or something.
Yes.
Now this atrocity is being carried out. I was looking out for other examples of this, and also because so many UKIP people have been attacked for once posting, something on Facebook saying, I don't know,
my brother,
something.
For example.
Oh really? Oh yeah, of course. I mean, almost, it's anyhow. The point is that I found this case from earlier this year where a councillor, a Conservative Party councillor, somewhere I think in the north of England, on a local radio show, accidentally he said he referred to something as a case of the N word in the woodpile, and it slipped out. I mean, this man's in his 70s or so, but I mean, in any case, it's a very dated, unpleasant term, and it's an unpleasant word. We all know that. But he, in his sort of, absolutely vital, self-volunteered for stand in front of the people, confess your crimes, and then shoot yourself moment. He said, and it was wonderful. He said, I realized what a terrible thing is. I don't know what has come over me, and things. I have now volunteered myself for diversity awareness training sessions and promise I will be. He shopped himself to the necessary forces,
to the commissars.
To the commissar, to rewire his brain, to make sure there were no phrases used in his childhood still there that could I mean, come on, a bit of human sense here. Again, I mean, does anyone think this councillor in question actually hates black people or something? No, he's probably just, I don't know, maybe he does, but it's very unlikely, it seems. It's far more likely that it's simply that he used a phrase that he just forgot and wasn't au courant anymore and so on. But that comes back to it. That it's not about him, it's about us. It's about what we want. We want him to be a racist. We want him, we, the great general public, want this Scudamore guy to be a sexist, because then we can all go, you see, we condemn him for sexism because we're not sexist. We're anti-sexism. We condemn the guy for using the N-word in a rhyme because we are anti-racist. It doesn't matter. And that's the same thing with Cameron. The facts are not important. What matters is how people perceive us. That's
defining yourself against the other. So in a way, in a way, it's actually this is a bit of a reductio ad Hitlerum, but nevertheless, I think it's possibly valid. This is the activity of evil demagogues around the world, is that when they're in times of dwindling popularity, they define themselves against the other, and the Jews, for example, were Hitler's Jews and Slavs were Hitler's bête noire. But Cameron is defining himself against the racists and the sexists.
Absolutely. But the crucial thing, though, James, is this, which is, you say, why do we put up with this? The reason is we volunteer for it. We volunteer for this. We all take part in it. I mean, obviously, I hope you and I don't. I hope our listeners don't. But we as people, most people at the moment in Western democracy seem to be going down this route. It doesn't matter what the facts are. We need to establish ourselves as not being this, not being that, not being bigots, not being nasty, not being mean, because then we think everyone will want to shag us. And that's the truth is, it's like that horrible thing when you hear men describing themselves as feminists. I can't remember who it was who who said it. Basically, a man who describes himself as a feminist is simply somebody looking to have a shag. There's something really
I
weird
think
about
I
this.
might have said that, Douglas. I've certainly said it a few times before, particularly in the context of Rod Liddle, who's our friend Rod Liddle, whose politics I'm quite sure were adopted purely to get women to bed with him. I'm a lefty, therefore you can safely shag me. And do you know what? I kind of wished I'd been so cynical myself. I would have had so much more sex in my life if I hadn't been an outspoken, evil, right-wing bastard. And on that note, gosh, I've enjoyed having you on the show, Douglas. You've been so fluent and so wise and articulate. And please come back soon.
I'd love to.
That was Douglas Murray you're listening to there, ladies and gentlemen.